was a case of the flu. Red blue, red blue, red blue, baby, red blue. Every kind of people got every kind of blue.
So it is September 15th. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio, like preparation. No buffalo
coordination.
Speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers.
Or timing.
We tackle the real issues facing Native people. We look back at our glorious and our grave history. A tough look at where we're at now. And look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and simulcast on the Gwe, CKWE in Tandanega. You can find our audio streaming at www.ltnradionet.com. And, of course, we're Facebook Live. I am John Kane. I'm your show's host and producer. I've got Matt Hill on the board.
Zego.
I've got Jake Proud behind the camera, getting us our video for Facebook Live and for our YouTube channel. And I have in studio, I've got some friends in the studio. I've got Robert Delamonte of Tuscarora Woodworks and Marissa Printup of Tuscarora Woodwork as well. And although we weren't going to do like a live ad or anything else, but you guys do some good stuff. I don't know. I think we got a sample of your work here. Let me see. I can pull it off the wall.
Hey.
Careful. Some Matt's artwork there. Watch out.
No,
Okay, take his word for it.
You gotta take my word for
Take
it.
his word for it. We got some on the wall.
Some amazing artwork on that wall right there.
Yeah, it's really stuck. All right.
Some wood, too.
You can see this and other products.
Well, Robert, you used to sit in with us a little bit more often back when we were on commercial radio. In fact, you graciously helped Matt fill in for me on one occasion, if I recall. I think it was when I was in Vegas or something.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Yep,
Is it at the time you were in the middle of the desert? And
Yeah.
You and Ross pulled over?
Yeah. That was cool. So it's nice to have you back.
Thanks. Good to be here.
First time in our new new studio to you anyway.
Yep, never been here.
And
First
of course,
time.
you got to check out our set for our videos and that kind of thing.
Very cool.
I'm
Yep.
hoping I'm going to put something on the front of that
Looking
desk
for
that
the
says,
weather.
Yeah, I got green screen there,
Green
so
screen for the weather,
I can I can do Vanna White or do anything I want there. Yeah. So, but it's funny. We put that whole thing together, and last week was the first time we actually took the time to shoot a video. That was my message to Andrew Cuomo. I still got a few more messages for Andrew Cuomo. We're going to talk a little bit about some of that today. And part of it is, it isn't just Cuomo. It really is the media. It is so frustrating when I look at how the media is covering this thing. The stuff they let Cuomo get away with, and how they kind of
feeding it
bolster.
to him.
Yeah, I mean, that Channel 2 at some point, and I had posted a comment on their Facebook page, and they had said something to the effect that the Seneca stopped paying because the state forgot to add dates, to continue the payment.
High-paid lawyers forgot.
They forgot? And where does Channel 2 get off saying that that's the reason, why the payment stopped? The payment stopped because the thing termed out. And, the thing is, for all the conversation that they're having with Cuomo, notice nobody's ever gone back to somebody from the Pataki administration. And nobody's gone back to the Pataki and said, you guys knew this thing was for 14 years, right? Nobody's asked them that question. Ironically, one of the lawyers who was defending the Seneca Nation was the state attorney general, or no, what would you call it? Yeah, I guess, state attorney general for Pataki. It was Vaco, Dennis Vaco. All right, we got this mic up?
Yep, he's up.
All right, okay, yeah, just making sure. Okay, yeah. So Dennis Vaco is actually one of the Seneca Nation's attorneys. So there's a certain irony there, and there is a lot that's not being said here. I mean, there's a lot of, the press does put some of Cuomo's racist comments in the media, but they don't call him out on it. I mean, and I've said this before, when he makes this general statement that the Senecas have a history of breaking agreements or making agreements and then not following them, if he'd have said the Jews or black or anybody else, there would be hell to pay. There would be all kinds of noise being made for him making such a racist comment. But when you can put a native name in there, Seneca's or anybody, it's like they give him a pass. And so they feed into his racism, and by extension, you still have to say that much of the media is biased against us, and I'll tell you, I never would have dreamed a few years ago that I would be singing the praises of Tom Precious, because back when we were battling the state so hard before, Tom was pretty rough on us in the media. Right now, he's the only guy that's actually doing any fair coverage of this thing. I mean, it's amazing to me, because when I consider what is really playing out here, and the governor says these things like, even his so-called quest to go into arbitration. For one thing, I don't think he's gonna pursue arbitration anyway. I think it's all a bluff. But think about that whole process. And the compact is kind of clear. I mean, it's pretty clear how this thing works out. I don't know if I just happen to have some of it here.
It's nice and compact.
I mean, the rules for dispute resolution, according to the compact, are pretty clear. If you have a dispute, the first thing the parties who has a problem, will provide a written notice of claim to the other. Upon the receipt of such written notice, the parties shall then meet within 14 days, shall negotiate in good faith, and shall attempt to reach a just and equitable solution satisfactory to both parties. So the first thing you're supposed to do is file a notice of claim, and so it's like a legal document. The governor's office sent something, but never suggested what they were sending was a formal notice of claim. Then weeks later say, oh yeah, we filed a notice of claim. Well, if you're the party that is filing that notice of claim, it is on you to accommodate or request a meeting. But rather than requesting or accommodating a meeting, Cuomo is avoiding them. And I personally think that Todd Gates has been way too gracious in trying to accommodate a meeting with the governor, because if his notice of claim doesn't sufficiently make clear what his position is and how it's backed by any of the language in the compact, then I'm not sure that he's even properly met the threshold for a notice of claim.
Isn't there a stipulation too that it has to be a speedy action?
They're supposed to meet within 14 days, but if a meeting is refused, and the logic would suggest that if the party filing the notice wouldn't be the one to refuse the meeting, because they are the ones who supposedly have a problem they want worked out. You're going to file this notice of claim because you want to work out a problem. Then you're saying, no, but we're not going to meet with you. So you've already violated part of the agreement, and this is from the compact. So you're supposed to have a meeting. The state rejects having a meeting, and then if you want to take into arbitration, a notice of arbitration shall specify with particularity the nature of the dispute, the particular provision of the compact at issue, and proposed relief sought. He still hasn't cited to anybody, not the media, not in his demand for arbitration, what it is he's saying that the compact stipulates that supports his position.
What line are you talking about specifically?
Yeah,
right?
Where does it say that the payments continue after 14 years? Where is it implied? And frankly, even if it's implied, that doesn't matter, because there's this thing called the Four-Corners Doctrine, if you want to call it that, I guess. And what it means is, if it isn't in the four corners of the document, then it ain't in there. And of course, some of the media is suggesting, as like I said, Channel 2 is suggesting, the Senate can stop payment because the state forgot to put the. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. So not only has the state,
Seneca's fault because the state forgot.
Well, and who says that they forgot? I mean, for one thing, this wasn't negotiated during Cuomo's administration. It was Pataki's administration. So I mean, to say that they forgot, and what they're really implying is that when Cuomo reached a settlement on the last dispute, that he forgot to make sure that payments were going to continue after 14 years, which is, again, bizarre world all by itself. But so far, the three parts of getting into arbitration start with filing a notice of claim. The state didn't really do that properly. The second part is to have a meeting. The state refused to have a meeting. And the third part is to specify with particularity what their claim is. They haven't done that. So you know what? If I'm Seneca Nation, I say, you haven't met the burden. I mean, true, it's not a court of law, but arbitration still has a threshold that you have to meet, and you're not even following the rules of arbitration. So at this point, even though the media keeps saying, "Oh, they're going to arbitration, they're going to arbitration," if I'm the Senate Canadian saying, "I don't know that we're going to arbitration. We have yet to see what the state has produced that suggests their complaint, their notice of claim, warrants arbitration. We don't believe that it does." They're trying to weave something in that's not in the compact. We can only argue what's in the compact, not what the state wishes was in the compact. That's not what arbitration is for. See, and I'm hoping that level heads will prevail in the Seneca Nation to say, nah, I don't think they've met the threshold that they need to meet for us to honor arbitration. Because here's the thing, that's not cheap. The Seneca Nation has to pay for a judge and a lawyer and split the cost. See, the way it works is the state will name will name a judge. The Seneca Nation will name a judge, and then the two judges will name a third judge, and that's all got to get paid for. So we're talking about millions of dollars here, because this could drag on for quite a while here. So you're gonna pay for a judge to sit and preside over this thing, go through all of this information. Actually, each side has to pay for a judge and a half, and then you have to put a legal team together to argue your case. And in the case of the Seneca Nation, they've got, obviously they have a lot of resources that they could bring to bear on this thing. They can bring in the National Indian Gaming Association, who are already siding with the Senecas. They can bring in the Interior Department, which is, really they're the ones who said that in order to have revenue sharing, the state has to provide a concession that is both substantial and quantifiable. I mean,
does the Attorney General have any input into this?
No, this absolutely avoids the
at the federal level.
Even at the federal level. In fact, that's the other thing about this. And I don't know where this is coming from, but the paper said that both the Seneca Nation and the state have agreed that this thing could be heard in federal court afterwards if they aren't happy with the, so much for binding arbitration. But let me read you this. This is, again, straight out of the compact, and what it talks about is using the it says, and this is arbitration decision. The decisions of the arbitrators shall be final, binding, and non-appealable. Failure to comply with the arbitration award within time specified therein for compliance, or should a time not be specified, then 45 days from the date on which the arbitrator award is rendered, shall be deemed a breach of the compact. The prevailing party, now only the one who wins, not the one who may not be satisfied with the arbitration, but the prevailing party in the arbitration proceeding may bring an action solely and exclusively in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of New York. So only if you win and you can't get the other side to comply, then you can sue them in federal court. But only the prevailing party can do that. So if the state loses an arbitration, they can't say, okay, we're going to sue you. They've actually waived that. They've waived their right to sovereign immunity, and they've waived it to this arbitration hearing. So the press isn't getting this right. They can read this stuff just like I can. And that's what I find so frustrating, because the press is not doing its job. Tom Precious is doing more than most. I mean, he's at least even called the governor out when he said that he's going to threaten to build casinos in Niagara Falls. Precious was real clear. No, you're not. You can't build a casino in Niagara Falls because state law doesn't allow you to. The amendment to the Constitution of the state constitution provided only 4 licenses for upstate, and all 4 have been awarded. And 3 of those 4 are operational. One is still in construction, I guess. But they can't just offer a license for I can pull it out of his hat or
other places.
Or other places.
To change that, does that take a state referendum?
Well, they're claiming that they can just go to the legislature, but because it may be the amendment of an amendment, if it has to follow the same constitutional requirements, they would have to go through 2 successive legislatures and then go to a public referendum. Even if that's not the burden to issue another license, they certainly would have to have the legislature change the existing law that's on there, and so that would be timely. Yeah. And of course, and Precious has even alluded to this, although he hasn't made a strong enough case for this thing yet. Of course, nobody has. is that the other thing is who is going to build a casino in Niagara Falls? I mean, if there's one area that's saturated for gaming in New York, it's Western New York. And if the Senecas aren't paying, that means that they automatically have a 45% advantage in the operating margin. So who's going to finance a $500 million facility knowing that the operators have to operate at a 45% disadvantage to an established to a casino that's been open for 15, 16, 17 years by the time they actually get something built? It isn't going to happen. It is such a waste of dialogue. It's such an idle threat that it's really pathetic.
I'm picturing the 1491's casino where they're just there at the park and
Yeah,
just got the table set up.
Ryan Redcord
Yeah.
dealing blackjack at yeah. Remember we were down at that park. Yeah, we were down there during the
Scotty Park.
Yeah, there's a Gotti Park down there. That's where they had Occupy Wall Street going on. Yeah, that was pretty funny stuff. But yeah, so I mean, and I'm glad that Precious is at least holding, calling him out of that. And Precious is the only one who said, look, we have asked the state multiple times or the governor, where is it stated in the compact that payments will continue? And of course he can't cite anything. And if he can't cite anything, then how are you meeting a threshold to say that there's a dispute relating to the compact? You have to say what we're not following in the compact. I mean, that's what's being missed in this whole thing. And again, it is such a failure on the part of the media. It's really, really frustrating. And I know that they give Todd Gates, president of Seneca Nation, an opportunity to respond. But you know what? He's got other things to do. I mean, some basic reporting could happen here. I mean, these guys could be real journalists. Open up the compact, read it, and this suggestion that somehow the MOU that came out of 2013 has some other language in it. No, it doesn't. I've read that too, and I've read that to some of you folks listening to the show. There's nothing in there that suggests the Senecas would pay beyond 14 years.
Now, is there anything in the compact that would not permit the Senecas from working directly with local municipalities?
That's already going on.
Yeah, that has happened outside of the revenue sharing anyway. I mean, there's a whole.
I mean, instead of sharing with the state, is there anything that would prevent them from sharing directly with?
No,
Niagara
there's
Falls
nothing
or
in the
Salamanca?
compact that prohibits the native gaming operators from sharing revenue with anybody. What's prohibited is the state or anybody else trying to squeeze them for money or imposing a tax or some sort of imposed revenue sharing.
So why hasn't Deister just come to the Senecas and said, "Hey, let's talk directly"? Oh, and just
It looks cooler when he's looking
when
intimidating.
he's standing
on
next
that.
to Cuomo.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Deister's a jerk. I mean, bottom line is when you look through the history and some of the stuff that he's done. I mean, this is the guy who threatened to let the casino burn down if there was a fire rather than sending. He actually said that people might not want to gamble with their lives. They may be gamblers, but they might not want to gamble with their lives by
But
going.
there's nothing preventing him from
Absolutely not
stepping up and having
and the
that
Senecas
conversation.
have opened the door and set a seat for them, but he's refused. And part of it is because like Deister, even Brown, and even Smitty, Mike Smith, these guys are waiting on the governor. And part of it is the sense that I get is the governor has forced those three guys into a box and said, you got to choose. If you're going to meet with the Senecas, you got to choose us or me or them. And and it's put these guys in a tough spot. My video, I shot that video last week for my message to the governor. My message this week is to the three mayors. And it's going to be interesting because it's hard to put them in one box to have a conversation because their situations are different. I mean, Smitty, is in a real strange spot because he not only is he Seneca, but Salamanca is Seneca. I mean, 96 or 95% of the city of Salamanca is located on Seneca territory. So the Senecas, would probably have a different hold a different position towards Salamanca than they would, say, the city of Niagara Falls and Buffalo. Buffalo, if they don't get $6 million from the Seneca Nation, it's not going to make or break them. It'll hurt. But Salamanca, 60% of their budget comes from the money that the state sends back to them from this gaming revenue or had. And in Niagara Falls, it's over 15%. So it's a pretty substantial amount of money for Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls is in some serious trouble with that money. Salamanca is in serious trouble, but you know what? Again, it's Seneca territory. The Senecas aren't going. They're not going to let Salamanca crumble, and even if the state bails on them, or although if Smitty is going to line himself up with the governor, he does so at his own peril. Same thing with Paul Deister. The other thing is, those three guys don't have to meet with the Seneca Nation. It can be anybody in those communities. I mean, it can be. It doesn't have to be government. It could be community leaders. It could be community organizers. It could be I think about in Buffalo, the School 19, which is a Native magnet school. Let them submit something. Let the hospitals directly in these areas say, look, we could use some help.
That's pretty much been going on anyway with like the beautification projects and whatnot.
Supporting hospitals, the Culinary Institute, all kinds of stuff.
One thing I was going to say is, how does Deister not know, as basically a operations director for the city of Niagara Falls, not know that his fire department is getting paid for ambulance calls or utilities and all that other stuff? I know, but how does he?
He's just lying about it. And
to what end though?
He's trying to just sway the public.
Right. He's trying to get the public on his side. And it's the same thing with the public who says, shut their water off or close off their highways. Look, for one thing, the Senecas will pay for their water if they and they have. And so you can't just shut somebody's water off to be vindictive. There's laws against that. It's extortion. You can't block a road. Neither the municipalities nor the state can be vindictive towards the Seneca Nation because the Senecas will not share revenue. There's no law that requires them. And the compact is clear that it was on for 14 years. And I can't help but go back to the thing that I've mentioned several times. There's a solid argument to be made that the revenue sharing provision of the compact was illegal under state law, that the state pulled one off over on the Senecas because they did not provide something of substantial value or quantifiable value. Well, it's quantifiable. And I can give it I can give it a value right now, 0, because to this day, when I've asked this question of anybody, nobody's been able to tell me what it is that the exclusivity provision prohibited the state from doing.
That
That it wasn't already prohibited from doing. I mean, because for them to say, well, we won't build a Class 3 Vegas-style casino in Niagara Falls. You're right, you're not, because your law won't allow you. They had a referendum change in 2013, but they still couldn't build one there, not because of the exclusivity provision, because that wasn't one of the sites that was voted on.
But the Senecas went into that knowing that, but knowing also that over the lifespan of the compact, there could be a referendum, or the two votes in
two successful legislative votes and then the referendum.
And so that could have happened during that time, and they could have actually done what they've done.
I know, but the idea that they paid for 11 years when the state was prohibited, what did they pay? What were they getting of value for 11 years?
I
think the idea of having an exclusivity, but the other thing is, I don't think the Senecas could have anticipated that the state was going to expand its gaming within the Class 2 realm to the extent that it did.
And that's not specified in the compact.
Well, there's language in there there was some pretty good wordsmithing about being able to breach Class 2 gaming machines without breaching Class 3 gaming machines. But here's where I got to get back to. We still run into a problem that if the state could do slot parlors in the racetracks, doesn't that reduce the value of that exclusivity? Mm-hmm. So if it's reduced the value, the sliding scale had the Senecas paying more over time, while the value of the exclusivity was actually being less and less. Mm-hmm. So that's where it starts to become a violation of federal law, because the federal law says the states can't squeeze money can't squeeze money from revenue sharing. They have to provide something of substantial and quantifiable value. And by substantial, it means it's got to be worth what the Senecas are paying.
So how was it even legal in the first place to provide exclusivity when it was illegal to even have gaming in New York at the time?
Well, that's part of the reason the Interior Department didn't approve the compact. Now, the Interior Department has a couple of choices when they get to evaluate a compact. They can either approve it, they can, I don't know if they can actually just stop it, but they can punt. and that's what they did here. The Interior Department did not approve and give this compact their sanction, and so, perhaps you wouldn't in advance you just say that how much value did the exclusivity have versus how much did the Senators actually give. I mean, who knows? Maybe the gaming wasn't going to be as profitable. Maybe you wouldn't have been able to open up Allegheny and Buffalo Creek in a timely fashion. But at the end of the day, the Senators paid $1.5 billion over 14 years for yeah, and that's the question. And we're going to go to break here. But I guess the other thing that people need to remember, for all of the rhetoric that the news keeps dwelling on, how much this is taking from Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and Salamanca, they still keep ignoring the fact that revenue sharing took $1.1 billion out of the area, never to come back. Only $400 million of that revenue sharing came back to us.
And all of the jobs that it has provided.
Oh yeah, and that. But I'm just saying, purely the revenue sharing, over $1 billion left the area because, and went to Albany.
What's that? The Tappan Zee Bridge probably got built with that.
Well, I mean, some of the pay to play is what got paid for with all that.
A couple boats and
there you
vacations.
Go. All right, what are we gonna take a break with?
Buffy St. Marie, no Keshagesh.
All right, a little bit of Buffy. All right.
I never saw so many business suits. Never knew a dollar sign could look so cute. Never knew a junkie with a money Jones. They singing, who's selling Park Place? Who's buying Boardwalk? These old men, they make their dirty deals. Go in the back room and see what they can steal. Talk about your beautiful but spacious skies. It's about uranium. It's about the water rights. Got Mother Nature on a luncheon plate. They carve her up and call it real estate. Want all the resources and all of the land. They make a war over it, blow things up for it. The reservation out at Poverty Row. There's something cooking and the lights are low. Somebody's trying to save our Mother Earth. I'm gonna help them to save it and sing it and pay it, sing it. No, no, guess you can't do that. No, 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 no. Guess you can't do that. No, 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 no. Guess you can't do that. No, 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 Oh, Columbus, he was looking good when he got lost in our neighborhood. Garden of Eden right before his eyes. Now it's all spyware, now it's all income tax. Oh, Brother Midas looking hungry today. What he can't buy, he'll get some other way. Send in the troopers if the natives resist. Old story, boys, that's how you do it, boys. Look at these people on their roll. Gonna have it all, gonna have complete control. Want all the resources and all of the land. They'll break the law for it, blow things up for it. While all our champions are off in the war, their final rip-off here at home is on. Mr. Creed, I think your time has come. We're gonna sing it and play it and live it and say it, sing it. No, no, guess you can't do that. No, 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 no. Guess you can't do that. No, 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 no. Guess you can't do
All right, thanks for coming back. That's Buffy St. Marie. That's no Kesha. It's no Kesha. Good
guess.
stuff there. Kesha. Keshe.
Keshe.
Okay, all right, I'll get it right. But yeah, some good stuff. Yeah, Buffy performed in Central Park this summer. Unfortunately, it was a day that I couldn't make. I had some obligations back home, so I couldn't hang around New York for an extra period of time. But she was gracious enough to join me on the show. We recorded an interview in this studio that I use on my show in New York, and it was great to catch up with Buffy. Good stuff. I mean, it's amazing that not just an artist can stay so relevant this long, but it's like we were talking about. We sometimes we played the disturbed version of sounds funny to say it that way, of Sound of Silence. That song, written in 1965, can still have such important meaning now.
Timeless.
There are some classics from the past that are like that no matter how many years pass, you realize that not only is history repeating itself, but the warnings in those songs just never seem to get heeded, right? So it's
the same stuff going on.
Yeah,
forever.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing, I know that people get bent anytime somebody of color mentions, throws the race card out there, but at some level, what people have to understand is the condescending tone and the air of superiority that the governor is expressing in this battle with the Senecas is by nature, or by definition, racist. I mean, the idea that a people who never formally yielded our sovereignty to the state or the federal government in the first place, and even now when operating under, although perhaps not required, but operating under a federal statute that was designed in part to keep the states from abusing Native people. The two things that IGRA was supposed to do was protect Native territories from the state and from organized crime. Those were the two things.
It's the same thing, ain't it? In this case.
Well, sometimes. Well, it's kind of like a dolphin is a porpoise, but a porpoise and a dolphin or something. Yeah, anyway, something back and forth like that. Not all organized crime are government, but all government seems to be organized crime. So I guess we can put it that way. But, yeah, there we go. No, that wasn't Robert. He wasn't playing
waiting
drums
for
off
it.
camera. Okay. But no, I mean, it's really, you have to look at, it's not just Trump. And that's why when I offered my meme, a few weeks back that stirred, quite a bit of conversation. And I said, racism isn't just a right thing. It's a white thing. My point wasn't so much the white part of it. It was that it wasn't just Trump on the right. There are plenty of people on the left that, whether it's really taking white privilege to the cusp of white supremacy, it still is born out of that same systemic racism. And I think that is, people are troubled hearing it because it's the truth. And I think people struggle with the idea that something could be broken down to just the basic premise that there are people in power who look down at everybody beneath them. And when that power and that superiority sometimes can be directly connected to race, then that is racism, because racism is both about superiority and about systemic power. And for the governor to suggest that and to make his comments about the Senecas having a history of breaking agreements, we can go right down the line, everything from Buffalo Creek to Kinzua to Route 17 to the Thruway. I mean, the Thruway, they screwed the Senecas so badly. You know how much the Senecas got paid for the right of way on the Thruway? $75,000. 8 miles of Seneca territory, and the state even gloated about it. They gloated about, man, I can't believe we got it for so cheap. And they made and so billions of dollars worth of commerce go through our territories in general, not just Seneca territory, but through all of our territories. But through Seneca territory, there is rail, there is power, utilities. There's a thruway, and it cuts through Seneca territory in two places, both in the southern tier on an interstate and the thruway in an interstate. Not to mention the secondary roads. And yet we are always at risk when we try to conduct commerce, native to native commerce. And, the Sean John case is an example of that, which, although his $1.3 million fine was thrown out by the state, they're still going after his employer, who was ERW Enterprises, for shipping a native branded cigarette from Cattaraugus to Gunyonge. And this is the kind of stuff that you realize that this is about power and control. And this is the state, which, again, it's not that the state is categorically white, but it is still that sense of white supremacy that is embedded in almost all state government and certainly in the federal government. And when you can pick on a people specifically because of who they are as a people, although we can argue whether native is being Seneca is a race or not, but regardless, it still fits the definition of racism. And I think it's important that people realize that it is that. This isn't just about legal interpretation, that there's something more nefarious than that and insidious about what's happening between the Senecas and the state of New York. And I just think it's important. And, and that kind of gets into the other subject I want to talk a little bit about. The statues issue. And I know some people can think that, oh, not the statues again. But it just keeps happening. I don't know if you saw this, but in Central Park last week, somebody painted up not the Columbus Circle Columbus statue, but another in Central Park, and they wrote "murderer" across it. In Binghamton, they threw a bunch of blood on a Columbus statue. In Yonkers, I think somebody actually ripped the head off of a Columbus monument that was in a little park. And then beyond Columbus,
did they just take Robert E. Lee down yesterday or something?
Yep,
in Texas.
Yeah, in Texas and Dallas, I think they did that. And of course, that's what part of when Trump was trying to defend the white supremacists in Charlottesville. He says, "Oh, some of those people are just there trying to defend a statue." And then we get into this debate again, about what the Confederate States of America was about. And no, they weren't just defending slavery. No, they were defending states' rights to have slavery. But it is what it is. And the thing is, all those people who say that, they don't want to look back at what folks like Jefferson Davis or Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president, Jefferson Davis being the president of the Confederate States of America, and Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president. They wrote very specifically that this new nation that they were forming, this new country, was founded on the superiority of white men over slaves and the right to have to own slaves. I mean, they said it. I mean, there was no denying it. Sure, there was other regulatory issues and tax issues that they threw into the mix. But people can say what they want. But even the guy who crafted the Confederate flag, he's got quotes in some of the stuff that he's written relating to the construction of the flag about about slavery and about owning people and about the South. I mean, I don't know. People can make that argument and whether the Lincoln and at that time it was the Republicans who seemed to be fighting for people's rights while the Democrats were in the South. I mean, there was like a role reversal there between Republicans and Democrats. But I mean, whether the North was really that interested in ending slavery rather than trying to make peace with the South, yeah, I think a good argument can be made that that if given the choices, the North would have allowed slavery to continue for a good long time, longer period of time in the future. I think they felt like their hands were forced a little bit, and not to mention the secession is treason. And so Robert E. Lee was guilty of treason, as were 13 governors, Jefferson Davis, Alexander Stephens, and Stonewall Jackson, all these guys who were fighting for the South. You could argue that they had committed treason, sedition, and they could have been hanged for it. So I think the idea of saying, no, we're not going to honor those guys anymore. Now, the other statue that I want to mention is there was a statue of Junipero Serra, who the Pope came to town a few years ago and or came to the United States and made him a saint. Well, not everybody thinks he's so saintly. They ripped his head off and they destroyed the statue of Junipero Serra out there in California.
Well, I just read something up in Quebec where they wanted to remove the name of the street, which was named after Lord Amherst.
Yeah, yeah.
So even at that level, they're actually doing it. I'm not sure if that's the real reason they're doing it or not, but they did remove the name,
Right.
and of course I had to share that and mention that Amherst, New York, is named after this guy, and Lord Amherst with the biological warfare and all that stuff.
Yeah,
with the
Lord,
smallpox.
he is actually the first documented case of utilizing biological weapons to kill people as a means of wiping out a
He
population.
wrote it down. You could
He
read
wrote
his
it.
writing.
It's his, and it's in his. It's handwritten. They didn't have typewriters and emails. I mean, it's his writing, and he was saying how it would be wise to spread the blankets and let nature take its course, as he said. But this is a guy who advocated letting disease wipe out Native people by intentionally distributing infected blankets. So, anybody who thinks that's a myth. I mean, a lot of times there's urban legends that get out there, but that's not one of them. That's true history, and it's written in Jeffrey Amherst's own hand. And of course, there, that name is, the suburb in Boston. It's also Amherst.
There it is, right?
There it is. So I mean, it's there. I mean, I think revisiting history to say, look, we have to rethink what these people who have been heroized, and the other statue that is really problematic. And you asked me about the Ganaka-Maoli flag when you came in, Robert. The folks in Hawaii are really, really livid over a William McKinley statue that they have there, because that statue, and this cuts right to the issue about how these statues can misrepresent history. That statue has a statue of William McKinley there with an annexation treaty in his hands. Now, the fact of the matter is, William McKinley never had an annexation treaty in his hands. The only attempt for an annexation of Hawaii came through fraudulent means by a bunch of white guys who said that they were officially the Hawaiian Republic now, that they had unseated the kingdom. And they drafted an annexation treaty, sent it to Grover Cleveland, and Cleveland said, "This is fraud." He says, I'm not going to entertain this. So that annexation treaty was rejected out of hand. It never got voted on. It never got signed. It never even really got serious consideration. So the idea of constructing a statue of William McKinley in Hawaii with a scroll in his hands that says annexation treaty on it is just false history. So revisiting that history to say, no, Columbus isn't a hero. Hey, and I got to say something else about Columbus. The fact that kids are being taught that Columbus discovered America, and Italian Americans are claiming, that somehow Columbus is their hero, and honoring Columbus is honoring Italian Americans. Here's where this thing gets really strange. You know who the first European, beyond the Vikings, I mean after the Vikings, the first European who came to North America, do you know who that was? It was John Cabot. And John Cabot was commissioned by Great Britain they heard that Columbus had found the island, so in the Caribbean. So he actually came, and actually Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick, up in that area, and then came all the way down the coast. So he came for Great Britain. John Cabot was Italian. I mean, Giovanni Cabot or Caboto or something like that. He would be a better candidate for the Italians to heroize than Christopher Columbus, who never made it to North America. Neither one of these guys
came here for Spain.
Well, and neither one of these guys, neither one of these guys came for Italy, but at least Cabot he was on a voyage of discovery and exploration. That's not what Columbus was after. Columbus was trying to do a speculative business venture. He was trying to get to India for money, and then and had to resort to the slave trade, including sex slaves, to show some profitability to his benefactors. But Cabot, who was Italian and actually probably more closely associated with Italy, than Columbus was. And then, of course, not to mention, there's Amerigo Vespucci, another Italian. I mean, so apparently there were some pretty good Italian sailors, but Vespucci and Cabot are much better guys for Italian Americans to, I don't know, heroize than Christopher Columbus. I had to throw that out there because I didn't realize that Cabot, because John Cabot sounds very British, but His real name was Giovanni.
I didn't know that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so, I mean, I think that I'll have to do a little bit more research on it and maybe do a little bit more of a story on that. But yeah, I mean, so the guy who actually made landfall and discovered the east coast of North America for Europe. I mean, and they didn't really discover it. We were already here, but who did the discovery for Europe was discovered for Great Britain, and he was an Italian sailor. I just thought I'd mention that. And again, not many people know this stuff, so somebody's got to look it up. So I guess it's me. All right, hey, we only got a
That's
few
your
minutes.
job.
We only got a few minutes left. I gotta mention this because another cop was acquitted, who killed a black man, unarmed black man, and so this Jason Stokely in St. Louis was acquitted. He's the one who killed Anthony Smith. It's back a few. I think it was like 2011. So it's taken this long for this thing to go to trial, and so St. Louis is if they're not completely under siege, they're prepared to be under siege because they know that there's going to be hell to pay. And this is where, again, Black Lives Matter comes in, Colin Kaepernick and all of this. This is about trying to raise awareness of the situation. And when I hear, and I talked about it on the show before, a couple of these real right-wingers say, well, how can people complain that cops are killing black people, or targeting black people when more white people are killed by cops than black people? Well, it's because you're not considering proportionality. For one thing, there are 5 times more white people in the United States than there are black people. Black people represent something between 70%, or no, white people represent between 65 and 70% of the American population. Black people represent between 12 and 13%. So, you know what? There's actually more convictions and crimes and indictments against white people than anybody else. Why? Because there's far more white people than there are anybody else. And I know everybody's worried that white people are going to become the minority, and that is going to happen. And it's because other people of color are gaining ground as a group. They're gaining ground, but no individual group of people, no black, Asians, Hispanics, certainly not Native people. We are not overtaking white people as the majority. What will happen sometime within the next decade or so, there will be white people will no longer represent over 50%. They will still, in huge fashion, be the largest group of people, and certainly in control of everything from wealth and governance.
They only have to be the 1%, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's 1% that leads the 70% of white people everywhere, anywhere. But yeah, that's the 1% is what controls everything. But but when people say this, well, yeah, but more white people are killed by cops. Yeah, because there's far more white people. I mean, you have like 2 times or 2 to 3 times a higher chance of being killed if you're black than if you're white, based on your population. On a per million people. But you know what? If you're Native, you have a higher likelihood by rate, because where it was like 6.9 people are killed for every million black people, it was like 12, or no, not think of it. It was like 10 and a half people for every million Native people. The issue is that we only represent like 7/10 of 1%. Less than 1% of the American population. So the total numbers are not high, but the percentage is high. Now the irony is the same guys that would argue that black people are barking, just making a bunch of noise about this, these police killings because more white people are killed. They would still suggest that black people are more involved in crime, but there's more crimes committed by white people, again, by the population. The problem is, if you look in the prisons, the prison population is disproportionately black, disproportionately brown, compared to white people.
70% of prisoners are black versus
versus the population.
where
Even
70%
though
of the population isn't black.
And the fact of the matter is, the crime rate between black and white is pretty even. White people commit crimes at the same rate that black people do. And that's obviously why there would be a lot more, white people killed, by cops. But, I guarantee, though, when a black man, is in a murderous situation, he is not going to get a cheeseburger bought for him on the way to the police station. And so I mean, this situation in St. Louis is pretty hot. It's pretty volatile right now. I know that there's been arrests already. I've been watching some of the stuff in the news, and all hell could break loose there. Now, I want to mention one other thing, because this is another area that I think gets disproportionately covered by the news. Looting. There was a lot of coverage of black people going into steal sneakers out of a shoe store. And so I've seen multiple videos that showed black people looting in Miami or something along those lines. Look, white people have looted too. That just doesn't make good TV, apparently. I think looting is bad. I think it's bad. And I've said this on a couple of occasions, on a couple of posts that I saw. The real looting is happening now. Now there are insurance companies, real estate speculators saying,
contractors.
"Yep, we can get in there. We can buy cheap." Now there's some money to be made in these hurricane ravaged places, and nobody's going to put those people on TV.
Yep.
So, I mean, and even when Superstorm Sandy hit New York, one of the things that was fairly well documented, the local contractors barely got any of that work. It was all big nationally, national companies that brought in big name contractors to do all the restoration and the recovery work that need to be done in New York. And that's what happens. This is a gold mine for some people. But the thing is, nobody's going to talk about how much that looting hurts the economy, and because of tax dollars and insurance rates and all kinds of other stuff. There's insurance adjusters that are going to go through and write up a bunch of fraudulent insurance claims, or undervalue them. So the common person is going to get hurt. Wealthy people who own property in these hurricane ravaged areas, they're going to do well. They're going to have their places renovated, and they're going to their insurances are going to cover, and they're going to get benefits afforded to them from FEMA and everything else. They're going to know how to apply for all of the aid and all the assistance and everything else. Trump's properties are going to be well taken care of. All of that stuff is going to happen. But I'll tell you, at the end of the day, those sneakers that got that ran out a window, all that stuff was probably going to get thrown away anyway. If the storm had busted through those windows or whatever else, if rain had gotten in there, all of that stuff was going to get tossed anyway. And I'm not saying that justifies you going in and stealing the stuff. But I will say, anybody who had to go steal water, I have no problem with that. If you had to go steal bottled water or food because everything was shut down, I'm sorry. To me, all bets go off. And again, in those circumstances where buildings have been opened up and there's valuables sitting there, the insurance was going to write all that stuff off anyway. It was going to go into a burn pile somewhere. And so that doesn't hurt societal interests as much as what's going to take place over the next several years, because a lot of money is going to change hands because of those insurance those hurricanes that came through.
This is just the beginning.
It's just the beginning. And I'll tell you, I'm heading down to New York on Wednesday. I think Jose is heading that way. No, not Jose to be blocked by Trump's wall. I'm talking about the hurricane here.
Hose B?
So Jose, they said, might come up the East Coast. So yeah, there we go. Hose B. All right. I don't know. Look, I know, kind of us revisiting some of this Cuomo stuff. If it sounds like we're spending too much time on this. This is an ongoing battle that the Senecas are going through, and I think it's important that people understand.
I thought it was a pretty beaten horse there for a while, and then I seen yesterday.
Yeah.
He was standing out there again, calling more stuff out.
Yeah.
I was waiting for him to blame the Niagara River discharge of the sewer.
Me too. I was waiting for him to blame it on the
this
casino.
is all coming from the casino.
Yeah. we did samples, and we know that was definitely a gaming refuse. Hey, look, before we go, let me give a shout out to the show's sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. I want to thank Eric White and ERW Enterprises. I want to thank good friends like Ed Schindler, who not only sits in the studio but has made contributions to the show. Tracy Brown, Cynthia Trice, Scott Snyder, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour. And I also want to thank those who have helped in the past because, again, we've gone from a couple of commercial radio stations to building our own studio. We couldn't have gotten through those years where we were paying for our airtime if we didn't have people that were doing advertisements, sponsorships, and making donations. So I thank you all for helping us get to where we are today. And I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. And, of course, CKWE, Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying our program. Look for my video next week. Jake and I are going to work on another one. I got a message for the mayors this time. No, I'm not talking about female horses. I mean, you know who I'm talking about. Paul Deister, Byron Brown.
Should invite him in.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Invite him in and sit down.
Last time I was in the same room with Paul Deister, he left dropping F-bombs, and it wasn't even my room.
Man, you know how.
All right, guys. We'll see you on Monday. Look for our video. Yahweh.